There's an overwhelming amount of financial advice in the news and on social media. Who do you listen to? Are they looking out for what's best for you? How do you tune out the noise? In this podcast, trusted advisors Emily Agosto, CPA, and Amanda Vaught, JD, bring their extensive education and experience to delve into all aspects of personal finance. Emily and Amanda make topics like investing, taxes, and financial planning interesting and accessible. And they provide a framework to help you think through the plethora of financial advice and news out there. Are you ready to start making the best personal financial decisions for you? Welcome to Connecting the Dollars with Propel Financial Advisors.
Hello, Amanda.
Hey, Emily, how are you?
Doing well. How are you?
Good. Happy belated Earth Day.
Yes. On that note, Amanda did her second annual Earth Day webinar earlier today, and it focused on ESG and green investing, and it was really interesting. So she's going to give a quick overview, and then we will post the actual recording on our show notes. And so you can listen at your leisure.
Yeah, go more. I think on the podcast we'll just do just an overview, a quick overview, and refer you to the webinar for a more in-depth coverage. But I mostly covered ESG, which has sort of encompasses a lot of different green investing issues. It's the one that's most in the news. It's the one that gets most attention. It's the type of investing that gets the most money. Their other one is, divestment, which is when, say, you remove fossil fuels, for example, from your investment portfolio. That can get some attention as well. But usually ESG gets a lot of the attention or the noise. Lately.
So you mentioned in the webinar, and we won't go into detail, but the 4 types of green investing, would you say, are traditional approach, divestment, I don't want to say that, impact investing, and then ESG. So for a lot of background on those, we've done podcasts on them, blog posts, and I think last year's webinar even went a little bit more into it. So we'll link all those.
Yeah.
But
and so that's good. That's fine. And then I covered the example of Tesla, who was in the news in 2022 because the S&P 500 removed them from their ESG index, and went through the reasons why they did that, how they approach ESG investing in their index. Depending on the investment product, the way the index is constructed is different. But for that specific one, they compare the companies within the sector relative to each other. So for Tesla, it's considered in the consumer discretionary sector. So they compared it with other companies within that sector and determined that their ESG scores were not as strong as some of the other companies in the sector. So they keep the best performing ESG within the sector. So Tesla didn't make the cut, which resulted in a lot of criticism from Elon Musk at the time. And it was a big news story that was, I would say, very poorly covered by the media because I think a lot of people don't understand what ESG is or what it does. And so that's why I thought it was important to have this webinar and try to teach people about what it's really about.
Yeah, I found it super helpful. I know what ESG is, but I always learn something when you kind of go through the details. Yeah.
And then I did say at the end, in 2023, the S&P 500 is adding Tesla back into their ESG index because every year they update it. It's always changing. And so they haven't published the reasons why yet. So if they do before this is published, I'll include those in the show notes to see what has changed.
Yeah, I'm curious too.
Yeah. So, and then what else? I got into performance. So then ESG performance in 2022, a lot, well, maybe everything performed horribly, right? Except for energy companies. So a lot of ESG investment products will include, oil, or excuse me, they will exclude oil and gas or fossil fuel companies from their investments. So people thought, oh, that means they'll have bad performance. But if you get a pure ESG investment, that doesn't just exclude oil or use a divesting strategy, it just uses an ESG strategy, right? Then it's going to be different, right?
Yeah. So you had showed a slide in the webinar that I think it was a 3-year comparison for the S&P 500, so the regular S&P 500 index, and then the ESG index, and that it outperformed the S&P, I can't remember by how much, annualized, maybe like just a little bit less than 2%.
It was almost 1.5%.
Okay.
Average, yeah, over the last 3 years. Yeah.
Okay. And that's pretty good considering what the market has been doing in the last 3 years. And I guess to that point, investing in ESG is outperforming, but how do fees come into play? Are people paying more for that extra performance?
Yeah, so that's a great question, right? Because fees are important when we're considering investing. So the example I showed in the webinar, that was for the index only. That outperformance, that did not include fees.
Okay.
Because we say you can't invest in an index directly, you can invest in an ETF that is based on that index, right? So if instead, it could have included an ETF that was based on the S&P 500. Those fees vary. They're typically not very big. I think Vanguard's is maybe 0.04% or something. Don't quote me, but it's something like that, very small.
Okay.
Compared to an ESG index, ETFs based on the index that I was showing are, I believe, like 0.28% or 28 basis points. So it is a difference, and that will impact the performance. So typically, I can't say across the board. I have to do a more in-depth study.
Yeah.
Probably Morningstar has done it. So even though they have shown that even with ESG funds typically costing more, either ETFs or mutual funds will cost more than, say, a standard equity fund, even with that extra fee, they are still having Morningstar called it hardy outperformance.
Hardy outperformance.
Yes,
Okay.
hardy. So it really, varies depending on the fund. So that's what we do, right? As financial advisors, is we have to balance the fees we're paying for things versus performance,
Right.
risk. We take all of these things into consideration. And so we're not just buying the generic fund for our clients. We're buying things based on like in-depth research, due diligence, interviewing portfolio managers, and staying on top of it. So, when you quote like the average, what happens is different than what you would actually maybe buy for a client. You know what I mean?
Right, for sure. And just kind of on that note of saying, like, as investment advisors, we balance, fees with performance. As far as ESG goes, would you as an advisor always ask a client if they wanted to opt in, or would you just choose an ESG fund because you're like, here, the performance is better? What's the best way to handle that?
Well, I think for us, it depends on the client. Everything does, right? Because
Sure.
we tend to individualize it. We don't do generic cookie cutter things and just force people into things. When we have new clients, that is a question that we ask. Do you want to consider social values investing or ESG or green investing? And then based on the client's answer to that, then we go from there. I would say the majority of our clients probably don't have a preference either way. Most of them say they want performance, right?
Sure, sure.
Just whatever you think is best.
Mhm.
And so then as like a discretionary portfolio manager, then we will include ESG products for a lot of our clients. Um,
Okay. Yeah, it's in the news so much. I feel like you can't get away from learning what ESG is, and it's kind of gotten maybe a negative connotation in some ways. So ESG is just it's not it's not a pejorative word. It's just a descriptor. And so maybe
yeah.
some people just either don't fully understand it, or I don't know. It's
Yeah,
just
no,
too new.
I don't think they do. I mean, that was the survey I quoted towards the end, was 85% of people said they didn't know what ESG was.
Mhm.
And 15% did. That's huge numbers who don't even know what that means.
Yeah,
And so it's just a lot of times in the news, it's becoming shorthand for something that it's not,
right.
it's not, I mean, criticism from the right calls it like woke capitalism.
Mhm.
That's really not what it is at the end of the day. It's about supposed to be about just like a methodology for analyzing risk factors,
Right, right.
non-pecuniary risk factors, like going a little bit beyond the financials and looking at the context of your investment.
Yeah. So you can just, as an investor, maybe you want to think of it as just potentially another way to diversify your portfolio. Um, or if you do care about what you're invested in more than performance, just do a quick analysis. It's a hard word to say today.
Yeah,
A
yeah.
quick analysis to see, what you're invested in. Because some people, a lot of people, um, several years ago were invested in things that maybe they didn't necessarily want to be invested in. I know we had a lot of controversy with people being invested in what's the Philip Morris, or in
Oh, tobacco.
tobacco, or in firearms, and it was just typical that that would be part of the portfolio because the performance was there, but they didn't necessarily want to be invested with that. So it's definitely an individual decision, but it's something you can
For
always
sure.
do.
Yeah, yeah. And yeah, I think it's hard for people too, because a lot of people don't understand investing in the stock market in general, and
Yeah.
then trying to add this other filter of also adding in social values. It's like, if you don't understand the investing, how are you going to know how to incorporate the social values on top of that,
Yeah.
So hopefully, we can provide a little bit of education around it, and help guide people through those decisions. Like, oh,
Mhm.
maybe I feel strongly about some like tobacco, but is that an appropriate thing to consider in your investment portfolio? Maybe
Mhm.
yes, maybe no. Depends on the person.
Right.
And those are the kind of issues we can help guide people, or the kinds of questions we can help guide people through. So,
Yeah. And it's not an all or nothing. Like, you don't have to say, I want to do all ESG. Like, you can
yeah,
kind of
for
work
sure.
your way into it or
Mm.
out of it, however you see fit.
Yeah, yeah. I think that's a good process, is if you are interested in doing ESG, I do is just a phase in. You don't want to
Mhm.
switch everything overnight. It's just one thing at a time. Um, See if it works, see if you like it, see if you're comfortable with it. Other people are more comfortable than others, and then go from there. Um,
Yeah.
and once you see that, maybe your performance is still fine, like we can't make any promises, right? But can become less,
Like,
scary or
yeah,
new, or
less daunting.
so less daunting. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So
Yeah. And this methodology it's still new on the new side. It's only really been recorded in terms of performance for a few years. So,
yeah, depending on the fund, there have been investment managers doing ESG investing for decades.
mhm,
It's just a recent rise in popularity has given rise to new indexes and new funds offering
gotcha.
that.
Yeah, it's very interesting. Even if, you just want to learn a little bit more about it, just so you can understand what the heck is going on in the news and the market. Sometimes um, I recommend Amanda's webinar. She breaks things down very easily, and I feel smarter just just listening.
There you go. Yeah.
So,
Thanks,
yeah,
Emily. I know
you're
you're a little
welcome.
biased though.
Just a little.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay. Well, is there anything else we wanted to cover? You know,
Let's see.
I would just say, we did touch on the politics a little bit. The politics, I did say it's having a chilling effect on offering more ESG type investing in 401k products, but it is the type of investment you can get through, a rollover IRA, a Roth IRA, through your brokerage account. That's where we work with clients to do those types of investments. And we love to work with people on that. So
Yeah, so reach out if you have questions or want any more resources. I know Amanda has done tons of research and can point you in the right direction. So
yeah. Okay.
awesome. Well, thank you. We'll be back, I don't know, in a couple weeks with some more exciting content for the second half of our season 2.
Yeah, I know. And we have some listener questions we need to address.
Oh,
So
yes.
maybe we should do an episode where it's all listener questions. I don't know. We were behind on
Oh,
addressing some of those.
that's a good idea.
Yeah.
All right. Well,
Okay.
connectingthedollars.com is where you can find everything, and we'll talk to you next time.
Okay. Thanks, Emily.
Bye.
Bye.
That will do it for this episode of Connecting the Dollars. Nothing discussed in this episode should be considered legal, financial, or tax advice. If you like what you heard, please subscribe for more at Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your content. When you do, please give us a rating and a review. To see the links we mentioned in our show, along with other great Propel Financial Advisors content, go to connectingthedollars.com. You can find our past episodes there and subscribe to our newsletter. And if you're still here because you have a general question, you can email us directly at info@connectingthedollars.com. Or, if you're interested in working with us, click the Schedule a Consultation button on our website. Thank you for listening.